America's highest court hands President Trump a big victory. His controversial travel ban on Muslim-majority countries stays in place. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. On Tuesday, the United States Supreme Court upheld President Trump's highly controversial travel ban order. The court's ruling means that the United States can restrict entry to travelers from 7 different countries. 5 of those are Muslim-majority nations, including Iran, Syria, Libya, Somalia, and Yemen. The court found that Trump's order was squarely within the scope of presidential authority. President Trump has insisted the ban is necessary for national security reasons.
We have to be tough, and we have to be safe, and we have to be secure. At a minimum, we have to make sure that we vet people coming into the country. We know who's coming in. We know where they're coming from.
But critics insist the travel ban is unfair and un-American.
This is a moral moment for our nation. We're a president who openly wants to put a religious test on citizenship. We're a president that wants to tear families apart. This is a moral moment in our country. What the Supreme Court decided today is not just wrong, it is dangerous. It makes us less safe, and it undermines the values of our country.
Many are calling it a Muslim ban and say it will just add greater division within the United States. Okay, time to get reaction to all of this from our panel. With us in the studio is Afshin Molavi. He is a senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Institute at Johns Hopkins University. Joining us from Philadelphia is Michael Johns. He is a conservative political commentator and is a former speechwriter for President George H.W. Bush. With us here in Washington, too, is Bruce Fein. He is a U.S. constitutional and international law expert. And also with us is Negar Mortazavi. She is Washington correspondent for Iran International. Welcome to all of you to the show. Bruce, let me start with you. This is a big legal case, of course, so let's start about what this ruling means. Is it a blanket ban on nationals of all 7 countries?
No, the order that was under review provides for waivers that can be applied, and there are instances that are set forth as examples, having a reunion with a close relative, coming to study, having an urgent business reason or otherwise. Now, at least that's in the face of the order. Whether it's implemented with any level of generosity is another matter. But there are a variety of exceptions, if you say, built into the order. Moreover, Congress can override the order at any time. We saw Cory Booker, who's a senator, denouncing the order, and that would just simply be a statute supersedes an executive order. And of course, if there were ever any subsequent president, he can revoke the order on his own, as President Trump revoked many of the orders of President Obama. Lastly, the procedural posture of the case is a little bit unusual. It came up as a preliminary order, what lawyers call a preliminary injunction, and so there would be the possibility of more fact-finding after the case now will go back to the trial court to determine whether there is additional evidence that perhaps the facial reasons for the executive order were a disguise or a pretext for hostility towards Islam, and that would clearly place the order in constitutional jeopardy under the First Amendment.
Right. Afshin, at least 5 of the countries involved in this order are Muslim-majority countries, and that's led to some calling this a Muslim ban. Right. Is it a Muslim ban?
No, this is not a Muslim ban, but this is the Muslim ban that President Trump was able to get through. I think that he probably wanted something like this. He wanted to show his base that he did, quote unquote, something. And so these were the countries that were most vulnerable. These were the countries that could be targeted without a whole lot of political lobbying pushing back against them. These countries, generally speaking, have adversarial relations with the United States. So this is the Muslim ban that President Trump was able to get through. And he was really playing to a base here. This isn't really has made us any safer today than we were 2 days ago.
It's political.
It's political.
Michael Johns, this is a ban on the nationals of 7 countries. Is this not discrimination based on national origin, ethnic origin, or even religious persuasion?
Not at all. I mean, just my back of the envelope math is if you go through the 6 largest Muslim countries, populated countries of the world, Indonesia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Egypt, you have to get all the way down to the 7th at Iran until one is actually included. These were very carefully vetted countries, and the concern is not at all political. It's rooted in the president's constitutional obligation to protect this country from all enemies, foreign and abroad, and his statutory authority, which is very clearly laid out in a 1952 governing statute that's been amended several times that fully empowers the President of the United States to have more or less autonomous control over our immigration and visa initiatives. So it's both legal, it's sensible, it's politically supported to the extent there is a political dimension. This was a huge issue in the 2016 presidential campaign. We just had an election on it. And I think the president's taking very seriously the promises of radical Islamic terrorism to bring havoc to the United States and excluding a handful of countries, suspending, not even permanently, their opportunity to do that until such time as they're able to resolve their vetting and processes that we can feel comfortable that they're not sending bad elements into the United States.
So, Michael, you believe that this order and this court ruling will make America a safer place?
Yeah, I do. I believe the countries that have been targeted have been hotbeds of terrorism. I think that's beyond dispute. Many of them are on our terrorist watch list and have been designated state sponsors of terrorism. And they have not indicated, for the most part, any willingness to cooperate with the United States to the extent that needs to be done for us to have a comfort level in their vetting of individuals that are coming to this. I mean, just take a country like Somalia. I mean, if you took somebody outside of, say, Mogadishu and one of the more rural areas, where would you even go to find out the background of an individual of that nature?
Right.
There's almost no methodology to do that. Somalia is hanging on as even a country.
Just one moment. Go ahead, Bruce.
I think, you know, and Michael, we knew to each other years ago at Heritage. He's a splendid fellow. How are you, Michael? But I think that he's ignoring the fact that prior to the order, the burden is always on the applicant for a visa to demonstrate an entitlement to be admitted. And if there's not evidence that you can show you have good character and that you show you're not guilty of criminal offenses, the visa is turned down. I've been involved in many visa issues prior to this particular order, and they were turned down regularly. Oftentimes, for national security purposes, they weren't even disclosed. So the idea that before the order there was some kind of slipshod vetting practice is simply counterfactual. And indeed, when the order was issued, it wasn't based upon the idea that these particular countries were the sources of all sorts of immigrants coming on and committing terrorist acts. In fact, two of the most major sources of terrorists into the United States, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, are not on the list.
Neither is the UAE and some of them.
Let me just quickly respond to that. To that, Bruce. I think you gave a really good summary of the waiver process, and that certainly does accommodate for individuals who have demonstrable basis for being here and whose backgrounds have been sufficiently vetted. And you're right about Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, but the United States State Department and this administration have comfort levels in the vetting processes that both those governments are conducting for the purposes of individuals entering the country, which is why they were exempted. But just by my math, finally, you have easily 900 million Muslims in these top 6 targeted countries. It's absurd for opponents of this to be indicating that it has anything to do with a Muslim ban. It is a ban of several specific countries, and for good reason.
Okay, Negar, we hear a lot about the legal side of this argument here, but it hurts people, real people who have relationships with other people around the world. I want you to take a listen to a Syrian-American woman. She was at a rally outside the Supreme Court, and this is what she had to say. Let's watch.
That there's a human impact behind this ban that we rarely focus on. A human impact that impacts people like me, an American born and raised in Boulder, Colorado. I am impacted by this Muslim ban. I haven't seen my family in Syria my extended family since the conflict began over 7 years ago. And this ban prevents me from being reunited with them in my home, the United States of America.
So here we have someone, an American citizen with an extended family in one of those targeted countries. This is going to affect millions of families, isn't it?
Definitely. Many Iranians are also in the same situation. Iranian students who are based in the U.S. who are now scared of leaving the country and not being able to get reissued a visa and coming back to the U.S. So they're basically stuck here. Graduate students who could be in this country for years. And then their families who can't come see them. I had a friend who just had a baby and her mother couldn't get a visa to come see her new grandson because it was stated as the new executive order. And there's many, many similar examples of this that we hear. And also the bigger population of people who just get discouraged by this and wouldn't even start a visa process to later be granted a kind of waiver. And who are these people? These are the ordinary people. This is the people-to-people connections. These are bridge builders. These are people who do cultural exchange, who do art, scientific, even environmental exchange, specifically in the case of Iran and the U.S. And it's just basically the soft power of the United States that's going to be damaged with this kind of policy. And I also wanted to add to what Michael said, that this was called a Muslim ban because the president started it this way. It's not the opponents who called it a Muslim ban.